free or die.
Free or die.
Now you are free.
Yes.
And we will be.
And the Russians are dying.
It's the best money we've ever spent.
Thank you so much.
So if you hadn't seen that video yet or heard the outrage that Russia has put forth over that video, that is Senator Lindsey Graham. He's a member of Congress. He's a Republican and is meeting with President Zelensky of Ukraine, obviously. Now, their conversation involved talking about ways to support Ukraine, the war effort, humanitarian efforts, etc., and obviously the Russian deaths. Graham appeared to make those two comments separately in different parts of the conversation, but the video that was put out by the Ukrainian presidential office put them next to each other, which has caused outrage in Russia. As such, the Russian government issued arrest warrants over the comments because, free speech is not allowed in Russia. So even if you say Russians are dying, you get an arrest warrant thrown at you. You can catch some charges for that. Russia's propaganda chief called for the assassination of Lindsey Graham. In response, Graham said, "I will wear the arrest warrant issued by Putin's corrupt and immoral government as a badge of honor." I'm not going to talk about that aspect of this. What I want to talk about is this really the best money we've spent ever as Americans? I'd argue probably not ever. I mean, the Louisiana Purchase is pretty good money, as well as World War II, but definitely probably in the last 75 years, it's up there. It probably is one of the top things. And it's been a while since I made a military budget video pertaining to Ukraine, several months actually. In fact, I had about 20,000 less followers the last time I did this, and the budget has actually changed some. So I want to go over that yet again and give you guys ammunition to discuss this with those around you that may say we're spending too much money on Ukraine and what we're getting out of it. So in total up till about February 24th, which is the official cutoff that I could find from the Council of Foreign Relations as well as the Budgetary Office, is we've spent $76.8 billion on Ukraine. When you put that next to our actual military budget, it is 9% the size of our total military budget. You have to understand something about our military budget. It's designed to counter, it's really designed to fight and win a nation's wars and provide for the defense of the United States. But who are we going to do that against? Our two major threats out there are primarily Russia and secondarily China. Some people might switch those. That's up for debate, different video. I don't think China is as much of a threat as Russia is. But Russia is currently the threat that this is countering, that this $76.8 billion is going to Ukraine to counter Russia. 9% of our total military budget. So already it's a bargain because the Ukrainians have largely neutered the Russians' ability to conduct any kind of wars outside of Ukraine or Russia itself. They're not going to be able to go into Poland or any other NATO nation. But to put that more into perspective, let's talk about U.S. tax revenue. In 2021, the U.S. tax revenues were $4.05 trillion. $76.8 billion is 0.02% of 4.05 trillion. So we have spent 0.02% of our total tax revenues on Ukraine. Again, still pretty much a bargain if you ask me. So breaking down that $76.8 billion, at the top we have humanitarian, which is $3.9 billion. That's for emergency food assistance, healthcare, refugee support, general humanitarian aid. Things that I think we all can be on board with supporting Ukraine, helping people out so that they can survive this terrible situation. That's $3.9 billion. Next up, we have financial support, which is $26.4 billion. This is budgetary aid through economic support. These include grants, loans, other financial support to keep their country running so their lights are on, their water's running, so that they're paying their people. Because if the government collapses, there's no way they're going to be able to fight a war. And that's a bad thing. Then the biggest chunk of this money, $46.6 billion or 61% of the total amount, is military assistance. These are broken down into three categories. You have security assistance, which is $18.3 billion, weapons and equipment, which is $23.5 billion, and then grants and loans for additional weapons and equipment of $4.7 billion. I want to start with this grants and loans because this grants and loans for weapons and equipment is a part of a larger foreign military financing program. This is something the U.S. does regardless of whether the war in Ukraine is taking place or not. We will do this. So this money wasn't necessarily allocated directly to Ukraine. It just has been reallocated to them because that is the most urgent crisis. It would have gone to someone else anyways. It's part of the foreign military financing program. Keyword is financing. A lot of these are loans. A lot of this stuff is loans. $17 billion of what we have given Ukraine are in loans. And if we want to see that money paid back, we might want Ukraine to win because Russia certainly isn't going to pay back the loans that we issued to Ukraine over this war. Focusing back on the total military assistance, we have $18.3 billion in security assistance. This is the training, equipment, weapons, logistics including the wages of those trainers who could be doing something else, the logistics needs, etc., to support the Ukrainians in getting them up to speed to NATO standards or to some better standard to fight this war. Next, we have $23.5 billion of the $76.8 billion is in weapons and equipment. Now, this isn't money that we're just handing over in bags or briefcases or doing wire transfers. You have to understand, yes, that's taking place. We are giving them money so that they can purchase things such as ammunition, etc., all the way to MREs and food. But a good chunk of that is drawdown equipment the U.S. bought and paid for years ago already. It was going to be sold at a reduced price to other countries, or it was going to a boneyard, or going to be used for targetry. Either way, it was going to go somewhere where the U.S. had already paid for it and is going not to be used by the U.S. As such, when we give it to the Ukrainians, they roll that cost up into the total aid we've given. So it's not like we're giving them bags of cash. In fact, the Air Force alone has $35 billion in equipment stored in boneyards. That's just the Air Force. Maintenance for that is just $180 million a year. And truly decommissioning equipment takes many labor hours as well as the facilities to do so that they can be safe in the environment to just bake in the sun. So they might be actually saving us money in that regard. Additionally, you have to look at the return on investment we're getting here. In real-world military testing of equipment, I don't think there's a better arena right now than what's going on in Ukraine. I mean, look at what we've learned from the Patriot and all of our missile defenses. We're getting real-world intelligence gathering on an absolutely dangerous foe. We're doing real-world assessments on modern tactics that are going to rewrite manuals for years. And Russia has actually driven more sales to the U.S. F-35s, Abrams tanks, missile defenses, all are being sold by the U.S. to NATO nations, to other nations concerned about what Russia's doing. This has been an outstanding advertising campaign for Made in America weapons. Plus, allowing Russia to run rampant through Eastern Europe by doing nothing in Ukraine, by not helping Ukraine, will result in a direct engagement with NATO, and that would cost trillions. Further, what would the cost be if China was emboldened due to a lack of international response to Russia? What would the cost be in lives? Because right now, the U.S. hasn't had a single service member killed in action in the war in Ukraine. NATO was shaken from this slumber because of the threats of authoritarian regimes, and we were shaken without having a single attack on one of our members. This is unprecedented. The last time we were attacked was World War II in 1941, when Japan hit Pearl Harbor. And we had to be shaken from our slumber in that way. Japan's GDP was 1/5 the size of the U.S. And they still attacked the U.S. China's is 3/4 that of the U.S. Japan thought the U.S. was a paper tiger, but awoke a sleeping dragon. If we show right now that we are a paper tiger in the face of authoritarian regimes, whether it was Imperial Japan or was Nazi Germany, or whether it is modern-day communist China through the CCP or modern-day Russia, it will cost us far more than $76 billion in blood and treasure. So yeah, it probably was one of the best investments we've ever made, and probably the best investment we've made in the last 75 years.